The shuttle bay of Arcturus Prime Military Academy hummed with activity as hundreds of cadets from across the galaxy moved through orientation procedures. Nora Vexley stepped off the Earth transport with her worn duffel bag over one shoulder and a long cloth-wrapped bundle secured across her back. She was 20 years old, average height for a human, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her uniform was crisp and new, but the bundle she carried looked ancient. Around her, the bay erupted with alien conversations in a dozen different languages. Towering Thrax warriors stood nearly 8 feet tall, their reptilian scales gleaming under the station's bright lights. They moved with the confidence of a species bred for combat. Quilarian nobles clustered together, their crystalline skin catching the light and throwing rainbow patterns across the metallic walls. Zenthari technicians scuttled on 6 legs, their insectoid features impossible for Nora to read. Krell soldiers flexed their 4 arms, comparing weapons and armor with the casual ease of those who had grown up handling advanced technology. Nora counted quickly. She spotted 2 other humans in the crowd of 200 cadets. They were already talking to a group of Quilarians, laughing at something one of them had said. She decided not to interrupt. Making friends could wait. The first week passed quickly. Physical assessments revealed that humans fell somewhere in the middle of most categories. Not as strong as the Thrax. Not as fast as the Quilarians. Not as durable as the Krell. But functional. Adequate. The instructors noted her scores without comment and moved on to the next cadet. Tactical theory classes were harder. Most of the other species had been studying galactic warfare since childhood. Nora found herself struggling to keep up with concepts that seemed obvious to everyone else. Her bunkmate, a Krell named Vorsix, sometimes helped her study in the evenings. He was kind enough, though he seemed puzzled by how little humans knew about the wider galaxy. Every morning before dawn, Nora would unwrap her bundle in the corner of the barracks and go through her routines. Slow, deliberate movements that her father had taught her, that his mother had taught him, going back 7 generations. The other cadets would sometimes watch with curiosity, but no one asked questions. The bundle stayed wrapped and Nora preferred it that way. On the 8th day, Proctor Yilmaz announced weapons inspection. The proctor was Zenthari, with 6 thin limbs and compound eyes that seemed to look in multiple directions at once. His voice carried the mechanical precision of someone who had said the same words 1,000 times before. All cadets will present their personal armaments for evaluation and registration. Standard issue equipment will be provided to those without adequate personal gear. Form lines by squad designation. Nora joined her squad at the designated marker. 12 cadets, 8 different species. Vorsix stood beside her, his 4 arms cradling a plasma rifle that probably cost more than a year of Earth wages. The weapon gleamed with fresh polish, its power cell humming softly. Thuras, the Thrax warrior in their squad, had brought an entire arsenal. A plasma rifle. A sonic disruptor. An energy blade. Ammunition packs hung from his belt like decorations. He caught Nora looking and grinned, showing multiple rows of sharp teeth. Always come prepared, human. You never know what you will face. The line moved forward slowly. Each cadet presented their weapons with pride. Energy shields that could stop projectiles. Gravitic hammers that could crush steel. Molecular destabilizers that could disassemble matter at the atomic level. Every piece of equipment represented the cutting edge of galactic military technology. Nora's hands felt sweaty as her turn approached. She stepped forward when Proctor Yilmaz called her name. Carefully, she unwrapped the cloth bundle. The material was old, faded from years of use. Beneath it lay her family's katana. The blade was simple. 3 feet of folded steel with a subtle wave pattern running along its length. The handle, wrapped in black cord, showed signs of being rewrapped many times over the centuries. There were no power cells. No targeting systems. No energy fields. Just metal and wood and cord, exactly as it had been made 400 years ago on Earth. She held it up for inspection. The silence lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then someone laughed. A Quilarian cadet, his crystalline features reflecting amusement. Is that from a museum? Did you bring a historical artifact by mistake? More laughter rippled through the assembled cadets. A Zenthari turned to his neighbor, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. Pre-industrial metalworking. My research indicates this design is over 3,000 years old in concept. Primitive by any standard. Thuras's laugh boomed across the bay, deep and mocking. Earth sends warriors with scrap metal? No wonder humans are such a small presence in the galaxy. You fight with relics while the rest of us use real weapons. Nora felt her face flush but kept her expression neutral. She had expected this. Her father had warned her that others would not understand. Vorsic leaned closer, his 4 eyes showing what might have been concern. Nora, I mean no offense to your culture, but that weapon will not serve you well here. The Academy uses live combat simulations. You need something with stopping power. Something modern. I can help you requisition proper equipment if your family cannot afford it. It is fine, Nora said quietly. This is what I brought. Proctor Yilmaz examined the blade with professional detachment, making notes on his data pad. Cadet Vexley, this weapon is registered as a cultural artifact. It meets the minimum requirements for personal armament, though I strongly recommend you also carry standard-issue equipment for practical exercises. I understand, Proctor. More whispers followed her as she rewrapped the blade and returned to her position. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, could hear the barely suppressed laughter. The inspection continued for another hour. By the time it finished, Nora had heard at least 20 different jokes about her museum piece and historical display item. Some cadets were kind enough to only whisper. Others made sure she could hear. That evening in the mess hall, the mockery continued. Nora sat alone with her meal tray, trying to ignore the conversations happening at nearby tables. Did you see the human's weapon? My grandfather's grandfather probably used something like that. Earth must be more primitive than I thought. I assumed they had at least basic energy weapons. Maybe she thinks she is in a historical reenactment instead of military academy. Thuras approached her table with 3 other Thrax warriors behind him. He set his tray down across from her with a heavy thud. Human cadet. Nora Vexley. She looked up. Yes. I have a proposal. Tomorrow during free combat practice you and I should spar. You with your earth relic, me with my training blade. His grin showed too many teeth. I am curious to see what pre-industrial weapons can accomplish against a real warrior. It will be educational for everyone. The mess hall had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Nora met his eyes. I am not required to accept challenges during free practice. No, you are not required. But I thought Earth warriors had pride. Or do you only carry that blade for decoration? Thuras leaned forward. Prove your relic has value. Or admit it is just a museum piece you carry for sentiment. The challenge hung in the air. Nora could feel every cadet in the hall waiting for her response. She took a slow breath, thinking of her father's words. A blade is only as worthy as the person who wields it. Let them mock if they wish. You know the truth. Tomorrow, she said finally. Free combat practice. I accept. Thuras's grin widened. Excellent. This will be very entertaining. As the Thrax warrior walked away, Vorsic slid into the seat across from her. Nora, you should not have accepted. Thuras is one of the best fighters in our class. His people train from childhood. You will get hurt. Maybe, Nora said quietly, rewrapping her family's blade with careful hands. Or maybe everyone will learn something. But inside, her heart pounded with doubt. Tomorrow would reveal whether 7 generations of tradition meant anything at all. Nora slept poorly that night. The challenge with Thuras weighed on her mind like a stone. She had trained with her family's blade since she was 12 years old, but she had never faced a Thrax warrior. They were bigger, stronger, faster. Their species had evolved on a high-gravity world where only the most capable survived. Thuras probably had 40 pounds of muscle on her, and he had been fighting his entire life. She rose before dawn as usual and unwrapped the katana in the dim barracks. The other cadets were still sleeping, their various breathing patterns creating a strange symphony of alien sounds. Vorsic snored with all 4 arms sprawled across his bunk. A Quilarian cadet named Petra hummed softly even in sleep, her crystalline body pulsing with gentle light. Nora moved through her forms slowly, carefully. Each movement had been passed down through generations. Step forward, blade rising. Pivot, blade cutting horizontal. Step back, blade returning to guard. Her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather had created these movements. Her father had practiced them every morning of his life. Now she carried that tradition forward, even here among the stars. The blade felt right in her hands. Balanced. True. When she finished, she found Vorsic awake and watching her. You move well, he said quietly, careful not to wake the others. But Thuras moves faster. And he is much stronger. Please reconsider this match. I cannot, Nora said, rewrapping the blade. I accepted the challenge. To withdraw now would shame my family. Vorsic shook his head, all 4 hands gesturing confusion. Human honor traditions are difficult to understand. Among my people, wisdom means avoiding fights you cannot win. Maybe I can win. Maybe you will get seriously injured. They did not speak of it again. The morning classes were standard tactical theory. Nora struggled to focus as the instructor droned on about fleet positioning and supply line management. Around her, other cadets whispered about the upcoming match. Word had spread through the entire academy. The human with the primitive weapon was going to fight Thuris. It would be, as one Zenthari put it, a brief and educational demonstration of why modern technology exists. Lunch came and went. Nora barely tasted her food. Then came advanced combat assessment class. The combat hall was massive, with reinforced floors and walls designed to withstand heavy weapons fire. Practice dummies lined one wall. Weapon racks held training equipment on the other. Approximately 60 cadets from multiple squads gathered for the session, talking among themselves as they waited for the instructor to arrive. Thuris stood near the center of the room, performing warm-up exercises that looked more like a show of strength. He could bend steel bars with his bare hands. His practice swings with a training blade created audible whooshes as the weapon cut through air. Nora stayed near the back, her wrapped katana at her side. The doors opened with a heavy metallic sound. Master Instructor Kelvin Thrace entered the hall. The effect was immediate. Every cadet in the room snapped to attention. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Thuris stopped his warm-up exercises and stood straight. Thrace was Vorten, a species Nora had only read about in academy files. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with thick gray skin that looked like living stone. 4 eyes sat in his broad face, arranged in a diamond pattern. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and old scars crisscrossed his exposed forearms like a map of ancient battles. He wore the simple black uniform of a master instructor, but he carried himself like royalty. The Vortens were known throughout the galaxy as the finest warriors in existence. Their culture revolved around combat excellence and warrior honor. A Vorten master instructor was someone you did not disappoint. Thrace's 4 eyes scanned the assembled cadets slowly, methodically. He seemed to evaluate each one in the span of a heartbeat. Then his gaze stopped moving. All 4 eyes focused on a single point in the back of the room. On Nora. On the wrapped bundle at her side. The silence in the hall became absolute. Thrace crossed the distance in 3 long strides. His footsteps echoed like drumbeats on the reinforced floor. Cadets scrambled out of his path. Within seconds, the legendary instructor stood directly in front of Nora, towering over her by more than a foot. She looked up at him, her heart hammering. Then Kelvin Thrace, master instructor, legendary Vorten warrior, veteran of 100 campaigns, did something no one expected. He bowed. Not a casual nod. A deep, formal bow from the waist, the kind reserved for warriors of the highest honor. His 4 eyes never left the wrapped blade at Nora's side. The cadets stared in shocked silence. Vorsix's jaw hung open. Thuris looked like someone had struck him in the face. When Thrace straightened, his voice carried clearly through the hall. That blade has a past. He paused, and Nora could see something like old pain flicker across his scarred features. May I? Nora's hands trembled as she unwrapped the cloth. She had no idea what was happening, but you did not refuse a request from Kelvin Thrace. The katana emerged from its covering. Simple steel. Old cord wrapping. The wave pattern in the metal caught the overhead lights. Thrace extended one massive hand, palm up. Nora carefully laid the blade across it. The instructor examined it with the kind of reverence people usually reserved for religious artifacts. He held it close to his eyes, studying the folding pattern in the steel. His thick fingers traced the air near the edge, never quite touching it. He tested the balance, letting the blade rest on one finger to find its center point. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. This is a Yamashita blade, he announced to the assembled cadets. Forged on Earth in what humans call the 16th century. The folding pattern is distinctive. The balance is perfect. The edge geometry follows techniques that were considered masterwork even among Earth's greatest craftsmen. He turned slowly, making sure every cadet could see the blade. I have lived for 400 years. In that time I have seen 3 other blades like this one. 2 were in museums, protected behind energy fields, studied by scholars who could only guess at their true purpose. His 4 eyes found Nora again. The 3rd was carried by a human warrior who saved my entire battalion. The hall remained absolutely silent. Thuris had gone very still. Thrace continued, his voice growing stronger. That was 47 years ago. I was a company commander then, young and foolish, leading Vorten shock troops into battles I thought we could not lose. The 3rd blade I saw performed something that modern weapons could not achieve. It held an edge when plasma cutters failed. It required no power source when energy weapons depleted. and it was wielded by a warrior whose skill made my own look crude by comparison. He carefully returned the katana to Nora's hands. I did not know that warrior had family. I did not know his legacy continued. Thrace's gaze swept across the other cadets, and his voice took on a harder edge. I heard laughter yesterday during weapons inspection. I heard mockery in the mess hall. I heard fools who mistake age for obsolescence and simplicity for weakness. Several cadets, including Thuras, suddenly found the floor very interesting. This weapon represents something most of you have never understood, Thrace said. Technology advances. It always has and always will. But the principles that make a warrior effective, discipline, skill, dedication, honor, these things are eternal. They do not require power cells. They cannot be jammed or hacked or depleted. He placed one massive hand on Nora's shoulder, a gesture of respect that made her want to cry. This cadet carries more than steel. She carries tradition, memory, the accumulated wisdom of warriors who mastered their craft when your species were still discovering fire. Thrace looked directly at Thuras. I understand there is a challenge match scheduled for today. Thuras nodded stiffly. Yes, Master Instructor. I challenged Cadet Vexley to demonstrate her weapon's effectiveness. And do you still wish to proceed with this challenge? The Thrax warrior hesitated. Around the room, other cadets watched with wide eyes. Thuras began, then stopped. He looked at Nora, then at the blade in her hands, then at Master Instructor Thrace. Finally he bowed his head. I wish to withdraw my challenge and apologize for my disrespect. But Nora surprised everyone, including herself. No, she said quietly. I accept the original challenge. Not to prove anything to you, Thuras, but to honor what this blade represents. Thrace's scarred face split into a grin. Well spoken, Cadet Vexley. Very well. The match will proceed as planned. The mockery had ended. Now came something far more difficult. Now came the test. The practice match was postponed. Master Instructor Thrace raised one massive hand and announced that combat assessment would proceed differently today. Instead of sparring exercises, there would be a lesson. The cadets exchanged confused glances but quickly arranged themselves into seated rows on the reinforced floor. No one questioned a Vorten Master Instructor. Nora found herself seated in the front row, her katana resting across her lap. Thuras sat several positions away, his earlier confidence replaced by uncertain silence. Vorsic settled beside Nora, his four eyes wide with curiosity. Thrace stood before them, his gray stone-like skin marked with scars that told stories of countless battles. He held his hands behind his back in a military rest position. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of lived experience. 47 years ago, I was a company commander in the Vorten Expeditionary Force. We considered ourselves the finest warriors in the galaxy. Our armor could withstand direct hits from heavy plasma cannons. Our weapons could cut through reinforced battle plating. We had never lost a ground engagement. He paused and something dark crossed his features. Then we encountered the Krynoth. Several cadets shifted uncomfortably. Even those unfamiliar with military history had heard of the Krynoth incursion. It had been one of the bloodiest conflicts in recent galactic history. The Krynoth were a bioengineered species, Thrace continued, created by an extinct civilization as living weapons. They had lain dormant on the colony world Helios 7 for thousands of years. When human terraformers accidentally awakened them, the Krynoth did what they were designed to do. They killed. Thrace began to pace slowly before the assembled cadets. The creatures stood 8 feet tall. Their carapace was harder than most starship hulls. They moved faster than anything their size should move. And they were intelligent enough to use tactics, to set ambushes, to learn from each encounter. His four eyes focused on something distant, seeing a battlefield from decades past. My battalion was sent to evacuate the remaining colonists and eliminate the Krynoth threat. We expected to complete the mission in 3 days. It took 6 weeks, he said quietly. And we nearly lost everything. The hall was completely silent now. Even the usual background hum of the station's life support systems seemed muted. We fought alongside several human mercenary units. The humans were considered inferior soldiers by most galactic standards. Physically weaker. Shorter lifespans. Less advanced technology. But they volunteered for the most dangerous assignments without hesitation. Thrace stopped pacing and turned to face the cadets directly. One unit called themselves the Ronin Company. 23 human warriors led by a captain named Hiroshi Vexley. Nora's breath caught in her throat. She knew that name. It was carved on a memorial stone in her family's garden back on Earth. Captain Vexley was not an imposing man by galactic standards, Thrace said. Perhaps 5 feet 9 inches tall. Maybe 160 pounds. But he moved like water, like wind, like nothing I had ever seen. And he carried a blade identical to the one Cadet Vexley holds now. The instructor's gaze found Nora, and she saw genuine emotion in those alien eyes. The final battle happened at Evacuation Site Delta. We had gathered 143 wounded soldiers and 72 civilians. Our transport ships were inbound, but we needed to hold the landing zone for 6 hours. The Krynoth had other plans. Thrace resumed pacing, but his movements were slower now, more deliberate, as though walking through a memory. They hit us with everything. Thousands of Krynoth warriors, all converging on our position. We formed a defensive perimeter and prepared to hold. Our plasma weapons cut down the first waves easily enough. But the Krynoth kept coming. And coming. And coming. He stopped and looked at his hands, flexing his thick fingers. After 3 hours, our ammunition began running low. After 4 hours, our energy weapons started overheating. The Krynoth carapace was too thick, too dense. Plasma bolts that should have killed them instantly only wounded them. Molecular destabilizers barely slowed them down. Our most advanced weapons were failing. A Quilarian cadet raised a crystalline hand. But surely your energy blades worked? Close combat weapons. We tried, Thrace said grimly. Energy blades could cut through the carapace, but they depleted quickly. The Krynoth shell drained power cells in seconds. Warriors would get 1, maybe 2 kills before their blades went dark. Then the Krynoth would tear them apart. Thuras spoke up, his voice uncertain. What did you do? We died, Thrace said simply. One by one the defensive line collapsed. The Krynoth broke through in 3 places. They were going to overrun the evacuation site. Going to kill everyone. He paused. Then Captain Hiroshi Vexley did something I will never forget. The master instructor walked to where Nora sat and gestured to her katana. He drew this blade and walked into the breach. Not ran. Walked. As calm as if he were taking a morning stroll. 20 Krynoth warriors came at him from the broken defensive line. I saw him move, and I understood that everything I knew about combat was incomplete. Thrace's voice grew softer but somehow more intense. The blade never stopped moving. It flowed from one cut to the next like a river finding its path. High cut to a Krynoth's throat. Low sweep to another's leg joint. Spinning strike that opened a third creature from shoulder to hip. The folded steel cut through their carapace like it was softwood. No power cells to deplete. No energy fields to fail. Just perfect steel and perfect technique. Several cadets leaned forward, completely absorbed in the story. Captain Vexley held that breach for 6 hours, Thrace said. 6 hours of continuous combat. The Krynoth kept coming and he kept cutting them down. His blade never dulled. Never chipped. Never failed. I fought beside him for the last 2 hours, and I learned more about real combat in that time than in my previous century of life. The transport ships arrived. We began loading the wounded and the civilians. The Krynoth made one final push, throwing everything at us. Captain Vexley was covering the last group of wounded soldiers when a Krynoth Alpha, the biggest one I had ever seen, came through the smoke. Thrace's voice cracked slightly. He killed it, but it killed him too. Its claws opened his chest even as his blade took its head. I reached him as he fell. He was still holding the katana. Still protecting the wounded behind him. I picked up his body and carried him to the evacuation ship personally. 143 soldiers lived because of him. 72 civilians lived because of him. I lived because of him. The master instructor looked directly at Nora. I carried his body with honor. I spoke at his funeral. I made sure his sacrifice was recorded in Vorten military history. But I never knew he had family. I never knew his legacy continued. Nora's hands trembled on the katana. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. He was my great-uncle. My father's uncle. The family never spoke much about how he died. Just that he died with honor, protecting others. Thrace nodded slowly. The highest honor a warrior can achieve. To give everything so others may live. He addressed the entire class now, his voice strong again. This is why I bow to that blade. Not because it is old. Not because it is simple. But because it represents something most modern warriors have forgotten. A weapon is only as effective as the warrior who wields it. Technology can fail. Power cells can deplete. Systems can be jammed or hacked or broken. But skill, discipline, and the will to protect others, these things cannot be depleted. They cannot fail unless the warrior chooses to fail. Thrace placed his hand on Nora's shoulder again. Your great-uncle taught me that lesson with his life. I see you carry the same blade. I hope you also carry the same spirit. Nora stood, tears streaming down her face. She bowed deeply to the master instructor, the way her father had taught her. I will honor his memory. I promise. I know you will, Thrace said gently. You already do. After several moments of respectful silence, Master Instructor Thrace gestured for Nora to hold up the katana so the entire class could see it clearly. She stood and raised the blade horizontally, letting the overhead lights catch the wave pattern in the steel. The other cadets leaned forward, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine curiosity. Look closely at this weapon, Thrace said, moving to stand beside Nora. What you are seeing is not primitive technology. It is masterwork craftsmanship that modern fabrication still struggles to replicate. He pointed to the subtle pattern running along the blade's length. This wave pattern is called Hammond. It is created through a process called differential hardening. The edge of the blade is made extremely hard to hold sharpness. The spine is left softer to provide flexibility. This means the blade can cut through tough materials without shattering on impact. A Zenthari cadet raised one of his 6 limbs. But modern molecular forges can create similar structures in minutes. Why would anyone spend months hand-forging a blade? Can they? Thrace asked. Truly? Show me a molecular forged blade that has survived 400 years of use without degrading. Show me one that has been passed down through 7 generations and still holds a perfect edge. The Zenthari cadet had no answer. Thrace continued his explanation, warming to the subject. The folding process used to create this blade involved heating the steel and hammering it flat, then folding it over itself. This was repeated hundreds, sometimes thousands of times. Each fold created layers. Thousands upon thousands of microscopic layers of steel. He held up his thick fingers, pressing them together to demonstrate. These layers create a structure stronger than the sum of its parts. The metal becomes dense, resilient, and flexible all at once. Modern analysis shows molecular bonds in these blades that our current fabrication methods cannot easily duplicate. Vorsic spoke up, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence. But surely the weight balance is inferior to computer-designed weapons? We can calculate perfect weight distribution down to the microgram. Perfect by what standard? Thrace asked. Perfect for a computer model is not the same as perfect for a living warrior. This blade was forged by hand, adjusted by hand, tested by hand. The smith who made it 400 years ago was not working from computer calculations. He was working from decades of experience, from knowledge passed down through generations, from an understanding of how metal and human movement interact. The master instructor took the katana from Nora, handling it with obvious respect. He held it in various grips, testing its balance point. Feel the weight distribution. The center of balance is exactly where a human hand naturally wants it. This is not an accident. This is thousands of years of human martial development refined into physical form. He performed a slow cut through the air. The blade moved smoothly, making almost no sound. When you swing an energy blade, you are fighting against the weight of the power cell, the projection system, the safety mechanisms. When you swing this, you are working with the blade itself. It becomes an extension of your arm. Thrace returned the katana to Nora and addressed the class again. Let me explain something about energy weapons that your instructors may not emphasize. Every energy weapon has a fundamental weakness. It requires power. Run out of charge and you have an expensive metal stick. Face an enemy with jamming technology and your weapon becomes useless. Enter an environment with electromagnetic interference, and your sophisticated targeting systems fail. He gestured to the katana. This blade has no power source to deplete. No electronics to jam. No systems to malfunction. In the vacuum of space, in electromagnetic storms, in the presence of the most advanced jamming technology ever created, this blade will still cut. It will still function exactly as it was designed to function 400 years ago. A Quilarian cadet, the same one who had laughed during weapons inspection, raised her hand tentatively. Master Instructor, are you suggesting we abandon modern weapons for primitive alternatives? No, Thrace said firmly. I am suggesting you understand the limitations of your modern weapons and prepare accordingly. After the Krynoth incursion, several elite galactic military units began studying human martial traditions. Do you know why? The cadets shook their heads. Because they realized that over-reliance on technology creates critical vulnerabilities. If your first solution fails, you need a second solution. If your energy weapons deplete, you need something else. Several Vorten Special Operations units now train with bladed weapons specifically because of what we learned from warriors like Captain Vexley. This caused surprised murmurs throughout the hall. The idea that elite Vorten units would adopt primitive human techniques was shocking to many of the cadets. Thrace let the information sink in before continuing. The Galactic Defense Force now includes close-quarters combat training for all officer candidates. Not with energy blades. With unpowered weapons similar to this katana. Because in 47 years of warfare since Helios 7, there have been 16 documented cases where electronic warfare rendered all energy weapons useless. In each case, forces that had backup unpowered weapons survived. Those that did not died. He paused to let that sink in. 16 documented cases. That was 16 situations where mockery of primitive weapons would have meant death. Technology advances, Thrace said, his voice taking on an almost philosophical tone. It always has and it always will. 1,000 years from now, the weapons you train with today will seem as primitive to future warriors as this katana seems to you now. But the principles that make a warrior effective do not change. Discipline, dedication, skill, honor. These are eternal. The master instructor turned to Thuras. The massive Thrax warrior sat very still, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Cadet Thuras, you issued a challenge to Cadet Vexley. You wish to prove that modern warriors are superior to those who carry traditional weapons. Do you still wish to proceed with this match? Thuras stood slowly. He was still much larger than Nora, still probably stronger and faster. But he looked at her differently now. He looked at the katana differently. Master Instructor, He began, then stopped. He turned to face Nora directly. I spoke from ignorance and arrogance. I mocked something I did not understand. If Cadet Vexley is willing, I would like to withdraw my challenge and offer my sincere apology instead. But Nora shook her head. The challenge stands. Not because I have anything to prove to you, Thuras, but because my great-uncle would want me to honor the blade by using it as it was meant to be used. Thrace's scarred face showed approval. Well spoken. But understand this, Cadet Thuras. If you face her, you are not facing one warrior. You are facing 7 generations of tradition. You are facing centuries of accumulated knowledge. You are facing a lineage that has never abandoned the old ways, even when the rest of the galaxy moved on to easier paths. Nora felt a surge of emotion at those words. 7 generations. Her great-great-great-great-great-grandfather who had forged the blade. The smiths and warriors who had carried it through Earth's turbulent history. Her great-uncle Hiroshi who had died with it in his hands. Her father who had taught her every morning before school. And now her, standing in a military academy among the stars, carrying that tradition forward. My family never forgot, Nora said quietly. Every morning we practice the forms. Every generation learns from the one before. My father told me that a blade without a warrior is just metal. But a warrior without discipline is just a person with a weapon. The blade and the warrior must be one thing. That is what 7 generations have taught. Thrace nodded solemnly. Your father taught you well. Technology can be purchased. Equipment can be requisitioned. But wisdom like this must be earned through years of dedicated practice. It cannot be downloaded. It cannot be installed. It must be lived. He addressed the entire class one final time. Learn from this lesson. Respect traditions you do not understand. The galaxy is old, and many species have developed effective combat methods over millennia. Just because something is ancient does not mean it is obsolete. Just because something is simple does not mean it is inferior. The measure of any weapon, any technique, any tradition, is not how new it is or how complex it is. The measure is whether it works when everything else fails. Thrace looked at Nora and Thuras. The match will proceed tomorrow. Both of you will use training weapons to avoid serious injury. But I expect both of you to fight with full honor and full effort. This is not about proving who is better. This is about understanding that there are many paths to becoming an effective warrior. The class was dismissed shortly after. As the cadets filed out, many approached Nora with new respect. Some apologized for their earlier mockery. Others asked questions about the blade's history or about human martial traditions. Vorsix walked beside her, unusually quiet. Finally he spoke. I have learned something important today. I thought modern meant better. I thought old meant useless. I was wrong. We all have things to learn, Nora said softly, carefully rewrapping her family's blade. Tomorrow would bring the test. But today had brought something more valuable. Today had brought understanding. The match between Nora and Thuras happened the next day. The entire academy turned out to watch. Master Instructor Thrace provided training weapons, a practice katana for Nora with the same weight and balance as her family blade, and a padded energy staff for Thuras set to minimal power. The fight lasted 7 minutes. Nora did not win, but she did not lose either. Thuras was stronger and faster, but Nora's technique was flawless. Every movement was efficient and purposeful. The match ended in a draw, with both cadets earning respect from their peers and a nod of approval from Thrace. After that day things changed. The mockery stopped completely. Other cadets asked Nora about her training methods. Some requested demonstrations of her forms. Vorcix even asked if humans would teach close-quarters combat to other species. The katana, once an object of ridicule, became something the other cadets viewed with genuine interest. 3 weeks passed. Classes continued. Physical training. Tactical simulations. Weapons drills. Nora settled into academy life, finding her place among warriors from across the galaxy. She made friends. She studied hard. She practiced her forms every morning. Then came the survival crucible. The crucible was the academy's most challenging test. Squads of 12 cadets were dropped into hostile simulation environments with limited equipment. They had to survive for 48 hours while completing specific objectives and defending against automated combat drones. The drones were programmed to military-grade difficulty. Cadets regularly suffered injuries. Some washed out of the academy entirely after failing the crucible. Nora's squad gathered in the briefing room on test day. Thuras, Vorcix, Petra the Quilarian, and 9 others from various species. They checked their equipment carefully. Plasma rifles, energy sidearms, shields, medical supplies, everything they might need for 2 days of simulated combat. Nora carried her katana. Several squad mates had questioned this choice, but after the demonstration match with Thuras, no one mocked her anymore. "Remember your training," said their squad leader, a stern Zenthari named Kess. "Stay together. Watch your ammunition. Conserve your energy reserves. The drones will test every weakness." They were transported to the simulation zone, a massive sealed environment designed to mimic hostile alien terrain. Rocky canyons, dense vegetation, artificial weather systems. The doors sealed behind them with a heavy clang and the test began. The first day went well. The squad moved through the objectives methodically. They encountered drone patrols and neutralized them with coordinated fire. Thuras proved his worth as a heavy weapons specialist. Vorcix's 4 arms allowed him to reload and maintain cover simultaneously. Petra's crystalline form could refract light to confuse drone targeting systems. Nora stayed in the middle of the formation, her katana ready but unused. Energy weapons were simply more efficient for most engagements. She did not mind. The test was about the squad, not individual glory. They camped the first night in a defensive position. Set watches. Rotated guard duty. Nora took the pre-dawn shift, sitting quietly while her squad mates slept. The artificial stars above looked almost real. The second day started normally. They advanced toward their final objective, a simulated communications relay they needed to secure. The terrain grew more difficult. Narrow passages between rock walls. Limited sight lines. Perfect ambush territory. Kess held up one clawed hand, signaling a halt. "Something feels wrong. Too quiet." The ambush came from 3 directions simultaneously. Combat drones dropped from concealed positions in the canyon walls. 12 of them, sleek and fast, armed with training weapons set to painful but non-lethal settings. The squad immediately returned fire, plasma bolts lighting up the narrow canyon with blue-white flashes. Then the jamming field activated. Every energy weapon in the squad died at once. Plasma rifles went dark. Energy sidearms stopped functioning. Even their shields flickered and failed. The sudden silence was deafening after the chaos of weapons fire. "What happened?" Petra's voice was high with panic. "My rifle will not fire." "Jamming field," Kess shouted. "Standard electromagnetic spectrum suppression. Our weapons are useless." The combat drones did not have that problem. Their weapons still functioned, designed to operate through the same jamming field they generated. Training bolts began hitting the squad members. Painful impacts that would leave bruises. In real combat they would be dead. The squad scattered, seeking cover behind rocks. But without weapons they were helpless. The drones advanced methodically, their targeting sensors tracking every movement. Thuras tried to throw a rock at one drone. It dodged easily and shot him in the chest. The Thrax warrior went down hard, gasping. Vorcix attempted to rush a drone with his bare hands. All 4 arms reached for it. The drone simply flew higher and shot him 3 times. He collapsed beside Thuras. "We are finished," Kes shouted from behind a boulder. "We cannot fight without weapons." Nora stood up from her cover. She drew her katana. The blade emerged from its sheath with a soft metallic whisper. No power cells. No electronic systems. No components that could be jammed or disrupted. Just 400 years of folded steel and human craftsmanship. "Nora, get down," Petra screamed. "You will be hit." But Nora was already moving. She had practiced these movements 10,000 times. Every morning before school on Earth. Every dawn in the academy barracks. The forms her father taught her. The techniques passed down through 7 generations. Her body knew what to do without thinking. The first drone came at her from the left, weapons charging. She sidestepped the training bolt by inches and brought the katana around in a horizontal arc. The blade caught the drone's sensor cluster perfectly. Sparks flew. The drone spun out of control and crashed into the canyon wall. The second drone attacked from above, diving fast. Nora dropped into a low stance her great-grandfather had perfected 100 years ago. Let the drone's momentum carry it past her. Brought the blade up in a rising cut that sheared through its flight stabilizer. It tumbled to the ground, disabled. Her squadmates stared in shock. Nora did not stop. Could not stop. 3 drones converged on her position. She moved between them like water flowing around rocks. High cut to one's weapon mount. Low sweep to another's landing gear. Spinning strike that caught the third drone's central processor. All 3 went down in less than 5 seconds. The remaining drones recalculated. They had been programmed to fight armed opponents with energy weapons. They had no tactical data for an opponent with a blade. They adapted quickly, spreading out to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Nora closed her eyes for just a moment. Remembered her father's words. The blade is not separate from you. You are not separate from the blade. When you move correctly, there is no difference. You are one thing. She opened her eyes and moved. The next 2 minutes were a blur. Nora flowed from one strike to the next, never stopping, never hesitating. Every cut was precise. Every movement was efficient. The katana sang through the air, finding gaps in drone armor, targeting sensor arrays, cutting through stabilizer fins and weapon mounts. One by one the combat drones fell. When the last one crashed to the ground, sparking and disabled, Nora stood in the center of the canyon surrounded by 12 destroyed drones. Her breathing was heavy but controlled. The katana in her hand showed no damage. Not a chip. Not a crack. Still perfect after cutting through military-grade drone construction. The jamming field shut off automatically when the last drone deactivated. Her squadmates emerged from cover slowly, staring at the carnage. 12 combat drones. All disabled. By one cadet with a primitive weapon. Vorsic spoke first, all 4 eyes wide with amazement. "That was... I have never seen anything like that." "You saved us," Kes said simply. "When all our modern weapons failed, your ancient blade succeeded." Thuras limped over, rubbing his bruised chest where the training bolt had hit him. He looked at Nora with genuine respect. "I understand now. What Master Instructor Thrace tried to teach us. Technology can fail. But skill never runs out of power." The squad completed their final objective and returned to base. Word of what happened in the canyon spread quickly through the academy. The squad that survived when their weapons were jammed. The human cadet who defeated 12 combat drones with nothing but a sword. 2 days later, the entire academy assembled for the Crucible completion ceremony. Master Instructor Thrace stood on the platform, his massive Vorten frame imposing even among hundreds of cadets. He called forward each squad that had completed the test, awarding them their achievement certificates. When Nora's squad was called, Thrace handed certificates to each member. But when he reached Nora he paused. From a case beside the podium, he withdrew a braided cord of silver and blue, the colors of Vorten military honor. The assembled cadets gasped. Vorten honor cords were rarely awarded to non-Vortens. They represented respect from a warrior culture that did not give respect lightly. Thrace placed the cord over Nora's shoulders personally. This cadet demonstrated something every warrior must learn. When your primary tools fail, you must have the skill and knowledge to continue fighting. Cadet Vexley carries more than a weapon. She carries memory. She carries tradition. She carries proof that humanity's greatest strength is not their technology, it is their refusal to forget where they came from. The academy erupted in applause. That evening, Thrace requested to speak with Nora privately. They met in his office, a simple room decorated with weapons from various campaigns. He gestured for her to sit. "I have something for you," he said quietly. From a secure drawer he produced a small data chip. After I learned who you were, I requested this from Vorten Military Archives. It is complete footage of the final battle on Helios 7. Your great-uncle's last stand. Nora took the chip with trembling hands. Watch it when you are ready, Thrace said gently. Understand the legacy you carry. Not just the blade but the spirit behind it. Your great-uncle taught me that a true warrior fights not for glory or conquest, but to protect those who cannot protect themselves. I see that same spirit in you. Nora bowed deeply, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Master Instructor. For everything. Honor his memory by living well, Thrace said. That is all any warrior can do. That night, Nora watched the footage alone in her quarters. She saw her great-uncle Hiroshi standing in the breach, blade moving with impossible grace, defending wounded soldiers while the transport ships landed. She saw him fall. Saw Master Instructor Thrace carry his body with reverence. She understood finally what the blade represented. Not just metal and tradition, but the principle that some things matter more than survival. That protecting others is the highest calling. That honor is measured not in victories but in what you are willing to sacrifice. She placed the katana beside her bunk and whispered into the darkness. I will not let it be forgotten. I promise. The blade that had been mocked was now honored. The tradition that had seemed primitive was now respected. And the warrior who carried both would ensure they never faded from memory.